Hello everybody, so this week we have hybrid form Kaido and Luffy in the cover of Shonen Jump, proving once again that even when it's time for other characters to shine in the actual chapter, it's still important for Oda to give Luffy some degree of attention. I really do like the art though, it's a pretty nice versus shot, and both of them look exactly the way they look in the newest anime opening. We also get a color spread, and I love seeing Robin wearing her old school cowgirl hat, that's the hat that she used to wear back in Baroque Works and Skypiea. Here it just kind of gives her that Indiana Jones vibe. Last week we were talking about the supernova being represented by animals, with Kid being a fighting bull. And so this week we get Luffy's animal, which is a monkey. And not just any monkey, because he's wearing a crown, which means that he is the Monkey King. He's the king of the monkeys. Sanji's shirt says, "I want freedom." Nami's blouse says either Odin or open. I'm pretty sure it's open though. And then if you read Zoro's jacket from right to left, it says, "Always be calm," which is what he's doing, just keeping calm. Now, just as a quick side note here, if you've been watching my videos, you know that ever since Film Red was announced, I made a prediction. And that prediction was that Film Red was going to have some canon-related material to it. I would be really surprised if One Piece Film Red doesn't have at least some canon content in it. And so over the week we got this tweet from Sandman saying that Film Red is actually the One Piece film where Oda has had the most involvement, even more than Strong World. And so while that doesn't necessarily mean that the movie's going to be canon, it does mean that the movie's going to have some canon weight to it, which is what I've been saying. It's what I've expected because of the timing of the movie, the fact that the movie is going to be about Shanks. We know that Shanks and Luffy have to meet at some point after Wano. Wano is nearing its end, and apparently this was a movie that Oda had been asked to be a part of before, but Oda kept on saying no because he didn't want to spoil information about Shanks. So he wanted to keep Shanks a mystery. But now that Shanks is going to enter the story, he's like, okay, this seems like a good opportunity. And not just from a story perspective, but also from a business model perspective. So if we look at other shonen series like Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen, both of these series have had their canon films open in theaters, and they were met with a lot of success. So it's also about following that model to some degree to remain competitive. And so according to an interview I read in Spanish, there were two conditions that Oda established in order for him to be involved in the film. The first one was that he wanted Luffy to be the main character of the movie. And then the second condition is that he wanted a female character to be incorporated into the film. And so we already know what she looks like. Also, according to that same interview, the antagonist of the film is not going to be somebody that Luffy can defeat by brute force alone. So it's not going to be a villain that Luffy can just defeat just by using his strength. And I think that's because the conflict will involve music somehow. The chapter itself starts with Momonosuke being able to successfully put some distance between Onigashima and the flower capital, and we'll talk about why that's relevant in a little bit, but he starts hearing Zunisha's voice, or at least what I assume is Zunisha's voice. I like how most of this chapter takes place on the performance floor / the live floor, because you're literally watching the action unfold on the stage, right? So it makes it very theater-like. You're just watching the action there on the main stage, and you're watching the actors do their thing. And it also goes really well with Law's dialogue in the beginning of the chapter, as well as with the title of the chapter. We get a shot of the Beast Pirates' Kid's crew and Law's crew, and in the middle panel, in the lower right corner, there seems to be a panda. I don't know if that's Panda Man or if it's just that guy's shirt. Again, like we saw last week, there's Law's crew. And the thing about these guys, we have John Bart there, is that these guys were actually the guys that rescued Luffy from the water. So a question I've had is how did they get up to Onigashima? Did they just grab on to Dragon Form Momonosuke from the mainland and fly up along with Luffy? And sort of on that same note is what happened to Caribou? Because he was right there with them as well. One of the things that I really appreciated about this chapter is that it seems like Kid's personality is back to normal. Because last week, Kid had an exchange with Big Mom where Big Mom was saying wow, I guess you brats really want to take my head, don't you? To which Kid responded something like, I'm actually driven by a different purpose now, or actually for some reason I feel like I have a different goal now. And so to me this felt like a reference to a speech that Zoro has in the anime when he's talking to Chopper in Alabasta. He basically tells Chopper that even though everybody in the crew has their own independent and unique goal, at the end of the day what makes them a team is the fact that each one of the members is willing to put their life on the line to help each other out. And then after that Zoro also says, however, because we've been together for so long, it almost feels feels like there's another purpose, another goal that's begun to emerge. And so that's what Kid said last chapter, which of course, I think it's obvious that the goal is to help Luffy out, right? And I understand that Oda wants Luffy to be the shining light for everybody to follow, because at the end of the day, he is the main character of this story. But at the same time, I'm really glad that we get to see Kid kind of going back to his usual self, where he's telling Law, don't tell me what to do. So that's Kid's Conqueror's Hockey speaking. Just don't give me orders. Law has some really, really great comedic dialogue here too. It's very self-aware. Now, I don't know if this is supposed to mean anything, because I know the tone in the scene is comedic. The context is that Law is giving Kid a hard time. But I do think it's interesting that he mentions two animals that also happen to correspond to animals that resemble characters of the worst generation. Again, I don't know if this is supposed to mean anything, but according to Oda, Urouge's animal would be an elephant, and Blackbeard's animal, Teach's animal, would be a hippopotamus. So it's interesting that Law happens to mention those two animals, because we know for a fact that both Urouge and Blackbeard have to play a role, have to be involved at some point in the story in the near future. So just like Kaido on the rooftop, Big Mom actually acknowledges Law's ability. I remember on the rooftop, Kaido said something like, man, Trafalgar, your ability is a pain in the butt. And so we have Big Mom here echoing that as well, and we find out that she can actually heal herself. And so it just reminded me a lot of Manchuri's Devil Fruit power and how she can heal people, but then also how she could also technically sacrifice part of her own lifespan to rebuild inanimate objects, as we found out in Dressrosa. And so that's interesting because it kind of reminds us that there are Paramecia Devil Fruits with healing properties that come with a cost, right? Life expectancy cost. Even Cuff's hormone power, for example, right, also comes with a similar price. And then, of course, when it comes to Law's Devil Fruit, we have the Perpetual Youth Surgery, or the Immortality Surgery. And so immortality comes at the expense of the user's life. Now, what I think is fascinating here is that because of the Immortality Surgery, Doflamingo says that the Opi Opi no Mi is referred to as the ultimate Devil Fruit by a lot of people. And so if we go back to Law's flashback, we learn that the Marines were willing to pay 5 billion berries, right? So that's 5 billion for the ultimate Devil Fruit. Now here's the thing. We know that both Kaido and Big Mom have acknowledged the power of Law's fruit, right? They consider it a threat. And so if we look at the bounties, at least the way they are now, we notice that both Kaido and Big Mom have bounties that are under 5 billion berries each. So if we were to rank the Opi Opi no Mi based on its worth, it would rank above Kaido, right? Because it's worth 5 billion. So there's only two known pirates that have had a higher bounty than Law's Devil Fruit, and that's Roger and Whitebeard. Also, the title of the chapter where we learn the bounties for the Yonko as well as for Roger is literally called Ultimate, just like Law's Devil Fruit. So up until this point, Law has the ultimate Devil Fruit, that is until we find out what Luffy's awakening is, right? Until we find out what Devil Fruit awakening the Gorosei were talking about, which I'm assuming they were talking about the Gomu Gomu no Mi. So until we find out what the real name of the Gomu Gomu no Mi is, Law has the ultimate Devil Fruit, but then Luffy will be revealed to have the ultimate Devil Fruit. So it's kind of like that Homer Simpson meme. The ultimate Devil Fruit so far. Big Mom then goes on to combine the power of Prometheus, Hera, and Napoleon to create the sword version of the Mazer cannon that we saw her used against Ulti. So she uses the saber to slice Kid's bull in half. Kid says it doesn't matter because he's just recycling metal parts anyway. So he jumps towards her and then hits her with an awakening move. So he stamps an S on her, which stands for South Pole, and then assigns the North Pole to a wall nearby. And so I do want to give credit here to Oda because it's nice to see Kid using another technique that does not involve him creating large metal constructions. The opposite poles attract, and this leaves Big Mom being stuck to the wall behind her as Kid's giant bull charges in at her again. However, Big Mom is so strong that she's capable of tearing that wall off, turning around just in time to use that wall fragment as a shield to protect herself from Mr. Cornadillo. Rest in peace, Mr. Cornadillo. I don't see him after that, so I'm assuming he passed away. Also, I think it was the wiki that pointed out that Kid's bull could also be a reference to the hand gesture that you see at rock concerts, and so that would go along with Kid's punk rock theme. Now, after that, I believe what's happening is that Big Mom actually fuses Prometheus's fire with Hera's lightning, and she creates like this brand new sort of fused homie that looks like a female, and she calls it Misery. And we see that she kind of acts like a homing missile because it follows its targets. Now, according to one of the early translations, the name of this new creature is actually a reference to an anime that came out in the 70s called 3000 Leagues in Search of Mother. And so the story of the anime is about an Italian little boy whose name is Marco, and Marco goes in search for his mom because Marco's mom goes away. And so it's about this little boy searching for his mother in South America. He faces a lot of obstacles during the journey. Like at one point I read that he gets a donkey and the donkey ends up dying. So the reference makes sense, right? Because Misery follows and searches for its targets, just like the little boy in the anime was searching for his mom. And so this also takes us back to Whole Cake Island, where we learned about Big Mom's attachment issues with Mother Caramel. Like when she saw the broken picture, she was like, "Where are you, Mama? Where did you go?" So it could also be a reference to that as well. There's also that line where Big Mom tells Kid, like, "We've been Yonko, we've been emperors for decades. Even before, you stopped drinking your mother's milk." So there's like that motherly theme to the chapter. I also appreciate the pun of the homie being a homing missile, or having like a homing quality, because homing, get it? But anyway, we get this shot, really big panel of this giant new homie using its arm to hit the ground. And I'm a little bit confused when it comes to that panel because I'm not sure if Kid is actually able to dodge the attack or not. Because we actually do get to see the back of Kid, like we see the back of his pants near the arm. I just don't know if he's actually getting hit by the attack or if he's actually able to dodge the arm. I'm guessing he's able to dodge, but then later, the next time we see Kid, he's all bloodied up as he's charging up and collecting all this metal so that he can build the creation that he ends up using by the end of the chapter. So maybe Kid was able to dodge the first time, but then because this thing chases its targets, maybe eventually this homie found Kid and actually was able to land an attack on him. Also, the tracking feature of this homie was actually foreshadowed back in chapter 1002 during the rooftop fight. At one point, Big Mom uses an attack called God of Lightning Tenjin, which is kind of like this lightning bolt. It's a homie, and at one point it sees, or it kind of passes by Kid, and Kid kind of thinks like, okay, like, it missed me. But no, the homie actually just turns around, kind of changes its direction and comes back right towards Kid and actually does manage to hit him. So it's kind of the same feature that we see here with Misery. Shortly after that, we see Law using tact to levitate a piece of a tower to drop it on Big Mom, and I'm pretty sure that that's the upper part of the tower that Zoro sliced when he first arrived. So shout out to Zoro for leaving that there for Law to use. The whole point of Law hitting her with the tower, though, is to create an opening so that Law can use Krum again, coat his sword, and then come down to pierce her. And he actually aims at the same spot that Brook was aiming for back in Whole Cake Island, but in Brook's case, he figured, nope, can't do this, can't pierce her, because I don't have that awakening. Also, something that I don't think gets mentioned enough is that Kikoku, which is the name of Law's sword, is actually a cursed blade. It's a cursed sword. And so according to Shimotsuki Kozaburo, he tells Zoro that when the weak fear a sword and call it cursed, that is a badge of honor. It's a sign of great quality when a sword gets called cursed. Now, Kikoku actually ends up extending all the way down to Wano, because I think the point is for Law to use it as a lightning rod, so that he can channel the electricity from his shockwave away from Onigashima. Now, as Law's doing this, Big Mom is actually pummeling him with basic armament hockey punches. And I really want to know why she's not using Advanced Conqueror's hockey here, because I feel like if there was a time to use it, it would be here. Regardless, though, I do have to give credit to Law's durability, as well as just like the scale of his attack. It definitely brought me back to Punk Hazard. I love Big Mom's shocked expression as she realizes what she's in for, because I think they both know that this is not an attack that is supposed to defeat her. It's just another way for Law to soften her up internally so that Kid is actually free to do some damage. But then you see the size of that giant crater that Law created down below, and you have to give him props. It's really impressive. I also think it's interesting too, because there's a scene in the anime where we see Law attack one of the Beast Pirates, and he's using electricity. He wants to shock this opponent, and as he shocks her, you can see the silhouette of his opponent's heart. So it just kind of gives me the impression that that's kind of what Puncture Ville is actually doing to Big Mom internally, but in a much larger scale. So now that there's a giant hole in the floor of the basement, I read a really good comment that said that maybe Yamato can use that hole to dispose of the bombs, right? To throw them away. Because if the bombs are frozen, you can just throw them into the hole and then they wouldn't land on anyone. They would just fall into, I think it's kind of like a wasteland below. Because as we saw in the beginning of the chapter, thanks to Momonosuke, there's some distance between Onigashima and the flower capital now. So the only thing left would be to deal with the fire of the island. And I've already talked about how I think that could be resolved. After Law lands his attack, Big Mom sends Misery after him, which means that the homie is no longer chasing Kid. We see Law all bloodied up and stuff, but he's kind of smirking and he says, "You're all clear, Kid, now let's blow this thing and go home."
You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
Hey, Big Momu. So I ended up learning some stuff about electromagnetic cannons this week, slash railguns. First thing I learned is that they take a lot of energy to use. That's number one. Number two is that because of the electromagnetic force that these things use, they're so powerful that each time you fire one of these cannons in real life, the cannon actually begins to tear itself apart. So you can only fire them a certain amount of times before they stop working. Because the energy, right, like the power of the blast is so strong that it tears the cannon apart little by little. That's why the military doesn't use them all that much, and it's why they don't mass produce these things, because they would take a lot of maintenance and they would be pretty expensive. Now the attack does make Big Mom bleed out of the mouth. However, I don't think that this is the end of the fight just yet. And there are several reasons for why I think that. The first is Big Mom's ability. It's already been established that if Big Mom eats her soul energy, if she consumes her lifespan, she can grow bigger, but she can also use her soul energy to heal herself. So I'm definitely expecting like a Shadow Asgard moment here with Big Mom. Except instead of her absorbing shadows like Moria did, she's actually absorbing soul energy. So if worst comes to worst, I feel like Big Mom can just eat her homies and recover. Now, given that the cover story is currently showing us Big Mom's territory, right? I think it'd be kind of cool if Oda connects what's happening to Big Mom in Wano with what's going on in Whole Cake Island, right? So, for example, if Big Mom gets defeated, I think it'd be a good idea to show us the effects of her defeat on the homies back home. So maybe we get to see Katakuri in the cover story and he notices that the homies aren't acting normal. Maybe they're tired or they're not feeling too well. This chapter is pretty poetic in a way because I remember back in Whole Cake Island, again, Brooke tried to stab Big Mom and it didn't work. And then Capone tried to fire a rocket launcher at her and it didn't work. And here in this chapter, we have Law being able to stab Big Mom and we have Kid being able to shoot her with a cannon. So, you know, it's kind of poetic. Another reason for why I don't think that Big Mom is down after this is the structure of this chapter. So if you notice, this was kind of like a Law-centric chapter. To the point where it's kind of funny because in the beginning, he was complaining about like being support. But if you look at this chapter as a whole, it pretty much seems like Kid is actually supporting him instead. And in fact, it goes along with the title of the chapter. So in other translations, including the official Spanish translation, the title of this chapter is something like key player, right? Or like the main artist, the key actor. And so all of those titles are referring to one person, right? It's singular. They're not referring to two people. The title does not reference Kid and Law. It's just Law. And so because of the focus that is given to Law in this chapter, I do think that Kid still has room to do something else. And I think that's even stressed in the beginning of the chapter when Law tells Kid, I'm going to be honest with you, no jokes, the next round is going to be the last one for me. So essentially Law tells Kid that he's going to run out of stamina after his next attack. And notice how Kid doesn't say anything to the effect of, yeah, me too, you know, I'm going to be done as well. No. He doesn't say anything like that. So to me, that gets me to think that, you know, Kid, there's more to Kid's arsenal that we still haven't seen yet. I'm hoping it's Advanced Conqueror's Haki. I kind of wanted him to charge up the cannon with Conqueror's Haki and shoot that at Big Mom. And I know that the way that Oda has handled Zoro and Sanji's fights is that we get a chapter called Sanji versus Queen or Zoro versus King. And then the chapter ends with them like landing a hit on their opponent, sending them flying, And then the next chapter, we find out that their opponent has been defeated, right? We get the Alabasta box that says, winner, Zoro, winner, Sanji. And so the ending of this chapter definitely gives sort of like that same feel that it's about to be over by next chapter. However, I read this pretty informative post from a One Piece Spanish forum from Spain. It's called pirateking.es. And somebody actually took the time to count the pages of Zoro versus King and Sanji versus Queen, and they added them up. And so this user called Condoriano23 says that Zoro versus King, as of chapter 1039, so including this chapter, Zoro versus King was 57 pages in total. Sanji versus Queen was 53 pages in total, and that currently, again, including chapter 1039, Kid and Law versus Big Mom, if you don't count the rooftop fight, is a total of 47 pages. So with that in mind, Kid and Law versus Big Mom is technically still shorter than Sanji versus Queen and Zoro versus King. So if this is supposed to be the ending of the fight, I think it would feel incomplete, to be honest, especially with Kid, because with Law, we've had him in several arcs. He was with us in Punk Hazard, Dressrosa, Zoe, Wano. So Law really does feel like fleshed out. Like it definitely feels like we know Law. We know who he is as a character. Whereas Kid, like there's a lot of backstory that we're not very clear on. Like we know that like he wounded one of Big Mom's commanders. We don't know which commander it was, so there's that. We know that he stole something from Big Mom, but we don't know what he stole, although I'm assuming it was probably a road poneglyph rubbing. We know that he challenged Shanks, or he tried to fight Shanks, and lost an arm in the process. In the beginning of the video, I was talking about how they're hyping up Film Red, right? So just getting a glimpse of that flashback, you know, the Kid Shanks confrontation, whatever that looks like. Just getting that in the actual chapter, or like in a conversation between Kid and Big Mom during this fight, I think would be a great tease. We also have Marco flying around somewhere, so maybe he can come in and give Law and Kid an energy boost. The point here is that the story tells us that Kid has been wanting to take down a Yonko for a very long time. And so I feel like what most of us want, not just with this Big Mom fight, but also with the Luffy versus Kaido fight, is that we want the victory to feel earned. We want a feeling of satisfaction. And I think personally for me, the best way of getting to that satisfied state is by pointing to the story and saying, yeah, this defeat makes sense. It makes sense because it follows the internal logic of the story. And I'm pretty sure Oda knows this as well, which is why I think there's a bit more to these Yonko fights. And it's interesting too because in Whole Cake Island we have Luffy declaring on more than one occasion that he's going to take down Big Mom after he defeats Kaido. After his fight with Katakuri, Katakuri asks him, so are you going to come back? Are you going to come back to take down Big Mom? And he says, yeah, because I want to be king of the pirates. And then Kid and Wano was actually saying the same thing about Kaido. He's like, I want to take Kaido's head. And so it's very clear that Oda kind of switched the script with this, kind of pulled a switcheroo and exchanged the roles because, it seems like Luffy's going to be the one to take down Kaido. And it seems like after Law helping him, Kid will be the one to actually take down Big Mom. So as of right now, it looks like Kid won't be the one defeating Kaido, just like Luffy won't be the one to defeat Big Mom. Now, if I actually just take a step back and put away my agenda or my expectations about what I want to happen, with Big Mom and Kid, if I just look at this chapter by itself, I thought it was a really fun chapter. I thought it was really good. I like the fact that it doesn't move around all over the place to different locations. There's a lot of focus just on one location. So I appreciated that. And yeah, it was just a really, really good fighting chapter. I mean, I guess we'll see what happens next chapter, right? If we actually get the Alabasta box that says winners, Kid and Law, or not, right? Hopefully not, but overall, good chapter. Also, just very quickly, the newest One Piece anime opening at one point has a scene of a beam coming from Onigashima hitting the flower capital. And so I'm wondering if this beam, which is surprisingly kind of like the color that Kid's magnetism is also shown to be in the anime, I wonder if that has something to do with like this final attack that we get in this chapter. At first I thought it was Kaido's bottle breath, but no, Kaido's bottle breath isn't that color. So I wonder if this was supposed to be a hint for this chapter. Thank you guys for everything you do, whether it's liking the video, subscribing, leaving a comment, or just watching, Or thank you for all of the above, in case you've done all of those things. Really, really appreciate that. Thanks again. Take care. Catch you guys next time. Bye.